Another matchup with new offensive coordinator, hopefully some more upside. We've got Arizona at Pittsburgh. We saw completely different passing chart from Kenny Pickett last week, actually realizing that there is a middle of the field that he's allowed to throw into. That saw huge gains for Pat Freiermuth, who had his best week of the season. Do you think that's a 1 week blip, or do you think that this is now something that we could potentially look at as a value tight end moving forward?
Yeah, so it was quite revealing that Frymouth talked this week about how the game plan was that if they saw two high safety looks, that they were going to look to target him in the middle of the field. And it wasn't even just like his best game of the season, it was a career high for him. He had 120 yards, first time he's ever gone over 100. And that's a player who's been in the league for a good few years now as well. And what's worth remembering is that the Cardinals also play two high safety looks quite a lot. It's not an intelligent defense that they play. It's quite basic in a lot of its schemes. And I think that the Cardinals could be in trouble again here. I think it's really difficult, though, because we know this offense isn't going to score touchdowns. Kenny Pickett, even last week in the Steelers' first 400-plus yard game on offense since Big Ben was at quarterback, Kenny Pickett had 11 points. He has 6 passing touchdowns this year. He's not thrown one since week 9. He's only got one since like week 6. So you're really counting on players to be able to get there through volume alone. If you're playing in half PPR formats or if you're playing in standard formats, I can't imagine it's much fun at all, really. But the running backs are where I land. Najee Harris, I mentioned this in the DFS deep dive write-up that our subscribers on the Discord get, that it's kind of just time to wipe the slate clean with Najee and view it through a clean lens for the rest of this season. One of my biggest problems with Najee Harris has always been that at times he's looked like a plodder. Well, Najee Harris leads the league in 15-plus yard runs this year, and we know that Jaylen Warren can be explosive. We know that the Cardinals' defense is awful against the run. They rank 30th in run defense DVOA. They've allowed the 5th most fantasy points to running backs. So, yeah, I think that the 2nd most fantasy points to running backs. So it's an area where we can lean on either taking shots at Najee Harris or Jaylen Warren in DFS. In redraft, I'd start both of them quite happily. We saw what Kyren Williams did to this defense last week. And then on the other side, it feels fairly straightforward. Kyler Murray's been a top 12 quarterback every week since he came back. Yes, last week, rushing yards weren't there. He only had 2 rushing yards, but he got there through the passing game. James Conner, I don't feel like he's particularly startable at the minute. I think if you've got a better option, you probably want to take it. In the 3 games that he's played with Kyler Murray, he has 6 receiving yards. He's just not getting that work that we saw when Josh Dobbs was there, when we've seen other quarterbacks in there. Trey McBride, Zach Ertz was released earlier today, just completely clears the pathway. Any kind of worry that you had about Trey McBride is erased. We've seen he's had 20 catches in the 3 games with Kyler Murray. Hollywood Brown kind of got going a little bit last week, a lot of garbage time because the game was out of hand so early. He had 6 for 88, still no touchdowns with Kyler, but eventually it's going to break. And I think that the Steelers, their pass defense isn't as it ranks 7th, but outside of Joey Porter, they really have problems when Minkah Fitzpatrick's not on the field.
Yeah, I think the James Conner point is a great one because the reason James Conner was a good value in the offseason and the reason why both of us were high on James Conner this year was that there was nobody else in this backfield and he was going to eat on just volume alone. The problem is they've added Michael Carter, and whilst Michael Carter isn't going to be fantasy relevant and quite frankly isn't very good, the one thing he is competent at is as a 3rd down receiving back, which is annoyingly just going to eat into James Conner's workload enough that it stops James Conner being that kind of solid RB2 and puts him into that flex territory. Yeah, it's not good enough for Michael Carter for him to be fantasy relevant at all. So it's just that annoying player that eats into a workload and achieves nothing, quite frankly. So yeah, very annoyed about what James Conner is probably going to be down the stretch, because if we're hoping he was going to be an RB2, sadly, I think he's probably going to be more like an RB3 flex play from here on out for the rest of the year.